All right, everybody, let's go ahead and get started. Welcome back to the Dharma Doors. I'm MC Owens, and this is the San Francisco Dharma Collective. And tonight, we're going to study another sutta. We're sticking with it. We're sticking with the Majjhima Nikāya, and we're moving on to sutta number 76 this evening, the Sandaka Sutta, the teaching given to Sandaka. Um, Sandaka is one of the wanderers. And so we've been exploring this section, a section of 10 suttas that are given to the Paribbājakas, the wanderers. Um, the first three were all given to the same person, Vacchagotta. And so we actually saw the conversion of Vacchagotta over the course of three suttas. And then we had two suttas to two other wanderers. And then tonight we're going to have our sixth in the collection. This is an interesting sutta tonight. And actually, let me start with a little bit of uh, like not exactly background, but a little bit of clarification. So interestingly, tonight, this sutta is one of those teachings that's not given by the Buddha. Tonight, it's Ananda, the Buddha's young cousin, right? We know Ananda. Um, However, I still want to obviously I still want to respect the teachings. I still want to respect the sutra in that way. And so let me kind of just give you a quick summary of the teaching, and then we'll kind of dive into it. But basically tonight it's going to be Ananda that's talking to Sandaka and kind of converting Sandaka to come over to the teachings of the Buddha. The whole teaching tonight, the whole sutta, number 76, the whole teaching, they're going to spend most of the time talking about kind of other views, drishtis, right? That idea of having a worldview. We've talked about this a number of times, especially in this section of the Majjhima Nikāya. So we're going to spend a lot of time in the beginning talking about four different worldviews. And then we're going to spend time, Ananda is going to spend time talking about four kinds of enlightened teachers. And then all of that is going to be contrasted with the Dharma, with the teachings of the Buddha. And so that's how the teaching goes tonight. We're going to hear a lot about kind of views and teachers that are not conducive to the holy life, or what is called brahmacharya. Now, the one thing that I want to kind of mention, because we're going to be talking about views tonight, if you're a serious student of suttas, so if you really want to study this teaching tonight, I would suggest really looking at this sutta, the Sandaka Sutta. It's kind of Ananda teaching a couple of the teachings that are from the Digha Nikāya. So we haven't gotten into the Digha Nikāya. We're kind of saving this probably until next year. But, these are the long discourses of the Buddha. But these are also not just the longer teachings. These are kind of considered like the Buddha's greatest hits, as we often say. Like these are kind of considered the most important of all of the early teachings. And the first two teachings in here, the first one is a very important teaching, a very important sutta called the Brahmajala Sutta, Brahma's net. We're going to want to pay attention to that idea of Brahma, the idea of Brahma's net. Now, This is also sometimes called the Sutta number one, Brahma's Net Sutta. It's also sometimes called what the Dharma is not. It's also sometimes called the Sutta on the 62 erroneous views. In other words, a lot of the teaching that's from this sutta, you'll find the exact same information in the Brahmajala Sutta, except it's being taught by the Buddha, not by Ananda. The other sutta that's very important is actually the second teaching in here. So sutta number 2, the Samanapala Sutta, the fruits of the homeless life. Now, that's a really important teaching, perhaps the most important teaching of the early suttas. And in that sutta, sutta number 2, I think it's King Ajatashatru, but it's a king who is recalling having gone to visit all of these different teachers and being dissatisfied with the Dharma that they're teaching, or the king is dissatisfied with the actual teacher. And then the king goes to see the Buddha and basically kind of is converted to Buddhism. So I'm just mentioning this because a lot of the views that we're going to go over tonight are in Sutta number 1 and Sutta number 2 of this. So, in other words, everything Ananda's talking about is coming from the Buddha. So, it's a Buddha-approved sutta, in other words. But let's go ahead and dive in so we can kind of start to dissect it and get into the teachings in that way. So again, yeah, no, Master, if we read, I used to teach some of the Digha Nikāya, but in person, long time ago, before we were recording, so may as well not have even happened, right? I'm kidding. I'm kidding. Indeed. Okay, let's dive in. So again, this is Sutta 76, the Sandaka Sutta, the teaching to Sandaka. By the way, this is a long sutta, so we're not going to read every word of it. I've kind of chunked out parts that I'm going to skip. But let's definitely read the beginning because it's interesting. Thus have I heard. On one occasion, the Blessed One, the Buddha, was living at Kosambi in Gosita's park. Okay. Now, on that occasion, the wanderer Sandaka was staying in the Pilaka tree cave with a large assembly of wanderers. Then, when it was evening, the Venerable Ananda rose from meditation and addressed the bhikkhus thus: "Come, friends, let's go down to the Divaka pool to see the cave." "Yes, friend," those bhikkhus replied, and then the Venerable Ananda went to the Divaka pool together with a number of bhikkhus. Now, on that occasion, the wanderer Sandaka was seated with a large assembly of wanderers who were making an uproar, loudly and noisily talking many kinds of pointless talk, such as talk of kings or rulers or presidents, talk of robbers, ministers, armies, dangers, battles, food, drink, clothing, beds, garlands, perfumes, relatives, vehicles, villages, towns, cities, countries, women, heroes, streets, wells, the dead, trifles, the origin of the world, the origin of the seas, whether things are so or are not so. But then the wanderer Sandaka saw the Venerable Ananda coming in the distance. Seeing him, he quieted his own assembly, saying, "Sirs, be quiet. Sirs, make no noise. Here comes the recluse Ananda, a disciple of the recluse Gotama, one of the recluse Gotama's disciples staying at Kosambi. These venerable ones, they like quiet. They are disciplined in quiet. They command quiet. Perhaps if he finds our assembly a quiet one, he will think to join us. So then all the wanderers became silent. Then the Venerable Ananda went to the wanderer Sandaka, who said to him, "Let Master Ananda come. Welcome, Master Ananda. It's long been since Master Ananda found an opportunity to come here. Let Master Ananda be seated. This seat is ready." The Venerable Ananda sat down on the seat that was made ready, and the wanderer Sandaka took a low seat and sat down to one side. When he had done so, the Venerable Ananda asked him, "For what discussion are you sitting together here now, Sandaka? And what was your discussion that was left unfinished, like right before I arrived?" "Oh, Master Ananda, let be the discussion for which we are now sitting together here. Master Ananda can well hear about it later. It would be good if Master Ananda would give a talk on his own teacher's Dharma." Then Sandaka, listen and attend closely to what I shall say. "Yes, sir," Sandaka replied, and the Venerable Ananda said this. So, Ananda says, "Sandaka, these four ways that negate the living of the holy life have been declared by the Blessed One who knows and sees, accomplished and fully enlightened, and also these four kinds of holy life without consolation have been declared, wherein a wise person certainly would not live the holy life, or, if they did live it, would not attain the true way, the Dharma that is wholesome." And then Sandaka says, "Well, but Master Ananda, what are those four ways that negate the living of the holy life that have been declared by the Blessed One who knows and sees, accomplished and fully enlightened, wherein a wise person certainly would not live the holy life, or if they should live it, would not attain the true way, the Dharma that is wholesome?" And then we're going to hear about it, but really quickly, So Ananda's about to, again, mention these four things that negate the holy life, and these four things that provide no consolation. And what these are is the phrase that's being spoken about is abrahmacharya vasa. So that which is not conducive to the holy life, to brahmacharya. And I really, really quickly want to remind everybody what brahmacharya is. It's a term that we see a lot in the suttas. It's a term that is basically usually translated as the holy life. What we want to remember always about that teaching or the idea of brahmacharya is that it is not a exclusively Buddhist term. It's a term used by kind of all of kind of Indian traditions to refer to a kind of, you could call it asceticism. You could easily gloss brahmacharya as asceticism. Now, normally, brahmacharya implies celibacy. And the term abrahmacharya, like not brahmacharya, is usually refers to not being celibate. But I want you to know that that's not all brahmacharya is about. The whole like idea of being a acharya, a practitioner of Brahma, well, what it means is you're kind of like a devotee of Brahma. But again, who's Brahma? We always need to remember that Brahma is the god of the realm of form. Deva, or Indra, Devanam Indra, Chakra, is the god of the realm of desire, the Kamadhatu, the realm of getting it on, the realm of sensual pleasures. That's the realm of desire, of kama. The realm of form, I was trying to think of like a good example and a kind of a really simple way to think about the distinction between the realm of form and the realm of, or sorry, the realm of form and the realm of desire. An interesting example would be a tear. In the realm of desire, a tear is about sadness. It could be about a number of different emotions, but the idea is that in the realm of desire, a tear has this kind of meaning and significance to it. In the realm of form, we are talking about salinated water molecules. And, salinated water molecules have no sadness or happiness to them. It's just salinated water molecules coming out of your face. And it's not even coming out of your face. It's just coming out of a, part of the body in that way. So the realm of form is this very neutral realm of like materiality that is not that realm of desire where we humans, and actually all sentient beings, are sort of projecting their desires and their wants and their cravings and their fears onto the material form, the realm of form. And so a brahmacharyan is someone who's interested in being in the realm of form. They don't want to hang out in the realm of desire and be sad or happy or this or that. They're seeking that more neutral, meditative realm of pure form, as it might be called. And I want to remind everybody that in the world of Buddhism now, they refer specifically to the Brahma Viharas, the realms of Brahma. Well, that's the realm of form. That's the realm of meditating. That's the realm of this neutrality in that way. So that's what they're talking about. And again, brahmacharya is not exclusively Buddhist. It's just a kind of a word for asceticism in that way. So in the world of Buddhism, though, to be a Buddhist practitioner, and especially this kind of Buddhist practitioner, is to be a brahmacharyan, right? Especially if you're a monastic like Ananda, for example. So now we kind of know what they're talking about. Talking about this particular way of living, that it's not invested in the realm of desire, interested in being in the realm of form. And Ananda says there's actually four ways that negate and go against brahmacharya. And so the first of them, and I'm going to spend a little bit of time like really going through the first of them, but then we'll kind of move through the second, third, and fourth kind of quickly. So here's Ananda telling Sandaka, here's an example of abrahmacharya vasa. He says, here, Sandaka, let's say there's some holy teacher, all right? And this is important. We need to remember that Ananda's talking about somebody who is presenting as a holy, wise teacher who's like living some sort of spiritual religious life. And Ananda's saying, all right, Sandaka, let's say that there's some holy teacher that has or holds such a doctrine and a view, a drishti, as this. Let's say this teacher says, there's nothing given. There's no offerings. There's nothing sacrificed. There's no fruit or result of good behavior or bad behavior. There's no this world. There's no next world. There's no mother. There's no father. There's no beings who are reborn spontaneously like gods or anything like that. There's no good and virtuous recluses and Brahmins in the world who have themselves realized by direct knowledge and declare this world and the other world. There's none of that, says this teacher. This type of teacher also says a person only consists of the four great elements. And when they die, earth returns and goes back to the body of earth. Water returns and goes back to the body of water. Fire returns and goes back to the body of fire. And air returns and goes back to the body of air. The faculties, they pass over into space. Then four men with the bier as a fifth carry away the corpse. The funeral orations last as far as the charnel ground. The bones whiten. Burnt offerings end with ashes. Giving, like being generous, is a doctrine of fools. When anyone asserts the doctrine that there is giving and making offerings and making sacrifices, it's empty, false prattle. Fools and the wise are alike cut off and annihilated with the dissolution of the body, and after death, they don't exist. So that's one type of a view or a teacher who holds a particular doctrine. We might refer to this as a form of materialism because of the reference to the four great elements. We might refer to this as nihilism. In modern discourse, we talk about nihilism as the idea or the philosophy that everything eventually comes to naught, as they would say. Everything eventually ceases, and therefore that's it. By the way, as we go through all of these, if you're hearing slight parallels with the teachings of the Buddha, like if you're hearing slight parallels with Buddhism and Buddha Dharma, that's intentional. You are supposed to be like, wait a minute, doesn't the Buddha kind of teach something like that? Sort of, but not exactly that. So I do want to address that. Before we get to the next interesting part, though, everybody clear about this, what this teaching is? Again, what I'm calling materialism or nihilism. By the way, one of the things that I think tonight we should be thinking about is, as usual, when we're talking about views, a sutta like this is definitely 2,000 years old, probably closer to 2,500 years old. And I want you to notice that this view, it's alive and well in the world, right? So this is a view, and the Buddha is saying, or Ananda is saying, if you hold this view, it's going against brahmacharya. And so we want to kind of explore the, how is it that holding this view would be running counter to the holy life in that way, right? But let's listen to the next little part, because this is like, in terms of the way Ananda is going to teach this, this is really interesting. So let's say that there's a teacher, and again, they're a holy teacher that holds this nihilistic, materialistic view. So paragraph 8 here. So concerning this view, so about this, a wise person considers this way. Now, this good teacher here holds the doctrine and view that there is nothing given, nothing offered, nothing sacrificed, there's no mother, no father, no this world, no next world, and after death, nothing exists. So this good teacher holds that doctrine in view. If this good teacher's words are true, then both of us are exactly equal here. We stand on the exact same level. I, who have not practiced this teaching here, and he who has practiced it. I, who have not lived the holy life here, and he who has lived the holy life. But I don't say that both of us are cut off and annihilated with the dissolution of the body, and that after death we shall not exist. But it's superfluous for this good teacher to go about naked, to be shaven, to exert himself in the squatting posture, and to pull out his hair and beard. Since I, who live in a house crowded with children, who use Benares sandalwood, who wears garlands, scents, and unguents, and accepts gold and silver, since I shall reap exactly the same destination, the same future course, as this good teacher. What do I know and see that I should lead the holy life under this guy? So when that wise person finds that this way negates the living of the holy life, they turn away from it. They leave that teaching behind. So this is the first way that negates the living of the holy life that's been declared by the Blessed One who knows and sees, accomplished and fully enlightened, wherein a wise person certainly would not live the holy life, or if they did live it, they wouldn't attain the true way, the Dharma that's wholesome. So in case you missed it, in case you kind of missed what he's saying there, right? So this, let's kind of create a image in our mind, right? So he's describing this person as kind of a naked, wandering ascetic, holy person, right? He's squatting, he's not shaven, or maybe he is shaven, but whatever it is, he has the appearance of like a holy person, and he's living this holy life. This other person, they're living at home, they got kids, they got bills, they got all kinds of other stuff going on, right? And this person's sitting here saying, if I understand what you're teaching correctly, you're saying it doesn't matter if I live the holy life or live at home, if I wear unguents or don't wear unguents. Your doctrine is telling me that we're on the exact same level. So why would I do what you're saying I should do when what you're teaching says it doesn't matter? Therefore, a wise person just wouldn't do that in that way. Everybody kind of see the logic there? This is very important in terms of like, if you're shopping around for a spiritual teacher or a spiritual tradition, if you were to meet somebody who was espousing such nihilistic, materialistic views, but then saying, and you should therefore come over and follow me, you'd be like, why? All right. So everybody kind of see the way that works. Okay. By the way, just for a little background, if you were to, where did it go? If you were to go digging around in those first two suttas I mentioned, this particular teaching that there is no, that there's actually no mother, father, offerings, any of that. In those suttas, that teaching is attributed to a specific teacher who had a sect, who was actually teaching that. That was sort of a rival of the Buddhists in that way. So we don't need to get into it tonight because we have a lot of ground to cover, but I just want you to know that. Let's dive into the second of these views that goes against brahmacharya. So this would be paragraph number 10. So again, Sandaka. Let's say there's some teacher here. Oh, sorry, did I skip one? We're okay, Noe?
Did we skip number 9?
I read it super quick at the end.
Oh, okay. Thank you.
Yeah, that was just the concluding one saying, and that's the first way. Yeah. On to the second way. Again, Sandaka. Let's say there's some teacher here who holds the doctrine and the view that says this. When one acts or makes other act, when one mutilates or makes others mutilate, when one tortures or makes others torture, and then there's a bunch of these all the way down to when one kills or makes others kill, or when one kills living beings, takes what not has been given, if somebody breaks into houses, if you plunder wealth, commit burglary, ambush highways, seduce others' spouses, utter falsehoods, there is no evil done by the doer. That's this view. We don't need to get into the next paragraph because I don't want to get banned. Um, by the way, I mean, because if you read this, it's pretty gnarly what is suggested here. But basically, the example is if you went around basically slaughtering everybody, just creating piles of bodies, there would be no evil done in that way. Equally, by the way, if one were to go along the north bank of the Ganges River, just giving gifts to everybody left and right, and making others give gifts, making offerings and making others make offerings, because of all of this, there would be no merit and no outcome of merit. By giving, by controlling and taming oneself, by restraint, by speaking truthfully, there's no merit, no outcome of merit. Now, about that view, though, a wise person would consider this way. This good teacher here holds the doctrine and view that when one acts, that there's no effect, there's no merit, there's no outcome of merit. But if this good teacher's words are true, then both of us are exactly equal here. We stand on the same level. I, who have not practiced this teaching here, and he who has practiced it. I, who have not lived the holy life here, and he who has lived it. But I don't say that whatever both of us do, no evil is done. But this guy, he does say that. And it's superfluous then for this guy to lead the holy life, run it right. Sorry, but it's superfluous for this good teacher to lead the holy life that way. What do I know and see that I should lead the holy life under this teacher? So when he finds that this way negates living the holy life, that person turns away from it. They leave it behind. A little bit of clarity, by the way. The first view that we talked about, there's no even doer. It's just an amalgamation of earth, water, fire, and air that go back to earth, water, fire, and air. So the first view is pretty extreme in saying there isn't even a person. That's part of the deal. This second one is saying, no, 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 no. There's like people, but there's just no point to any of it. In other words, if we wanted to take this view, this drishti, and we wanted to understand it in kind of modern terms, I would probably chalk this up to what is called feudalism, like futility. In other words, like there is a recognition that there is action, but it's futile. It doesn't matter. There is no good or bad in that regard. Once again, though, you hear the counter argument, which is saying, all right, but if that's true, then there's no merit to living the holy life. So why would I follow you Why would I give up all my clothes and live naked like you if what you're telling me is that it's futile? So everybody kind of see the counter argument to that? Excellent. Yeah, let's keep moving because we have a lot of ground to cover. So everybody feeling okay about those or not? I don't want you to feel okay about those two views, but okay. So let's do the next one. Da, 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 da. So that's the second way that negates the living of the holy life that has been declared by the Blessed One. And now, paragraph 13. Again, Sandaka, let's just say that there was some teacher who holds such a doctrine and view as this. There's no cause and or condition for the defilement of beings. Beings are defiled without a cause or condition. There's no cause or condition for the purification of beings. Beings are purified without cause or condition. There's no power, like personal power. You might think of it as willpower. There is no willpower. There's no energy. There's no manly strength. There's no manly endurance. All beings, all living things, all creatures, all souls are without mastery, without power, without energy, molded by destiny, circumstance, and nature. They experience pleasure and pain in the 6 classes of rebirth. All right, let's actually talk about that one first, and then we'll quickly read the retort in that way. So we'll notice, we would probably want to notice here the inclusion of the soul. That idea of the soul is sort of missing in the other two. And it's kind of implied with the idea of merit. And the second one, in saying that there's no outcome to merit, it's kind of saying that there's no soul that is going to be reborn by virtue of that merit or demerit. Whereas this third one is saying, no, 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 there are living beings. And not only that, they are inhabited with souls that we are to understand go on to rebirth in a new world or in a new life. It's just that all of that is out of our control. So this third teaching would be a kind of maybe fatalism, might be the word, where there are living beings, there are souls, but the outcome of all of this is sort of, it's like a giant physics, you know, event that's just unfolding. And there's nothing to be done one way or the other. Does that make sense? In contrast to the other two, it's a slightly different view, but it has the same problem, which is that hearing about this, a wise person would consider this way. This good teacher holds the doctrine and the view that there's no cause and condition, that it's basically, what's the term? Molded by destiny, right? But if this good teacher's words are true, then both of us are exactly equal here. We stand on the same level. I who have not practiced this way, and he who has practiced this way, I who have not lived the holy life, and he who has lived the holy life, right? But I don't go around talking this way, whereas he does go around talking this way, but it's superfluous for this good teacher to lead the holy life then. What do I know and see that I should lead the holy life under this teacher, right? I don't see anything that's leading me towards this person. So when a wise person finds that this way negates the living of the holy life, they turn away from it. They leave it behind. And then number 4, on this is paragraph 16. I did skip paragraph 15, but we know all about that. So now the 4th way, again, Sandaka. Here, Some teacher holds a doctrine and view such as this. There are these 7 bodies that are unmade, not brought forth, uncreated, without a creator, barren, standing like mountain peaks, standing like pillars. These 7 bodies do not move or change or obstruct each other. None of them is able to arouse pleasure or pleasure and pain in another. And what are these 7 bodies, you may wonder? They are the earth body, the water body, the fire body, the air body, pleasure, pain, and the soul as the 7th. Those 7 bodies are unmade, uncreated, and so forth. Herein, there is no killer, no slaughterer, no hearer, no speaker, no cognizer, no intimator. Even those who cut off someone's head with a sharp razor do not deprive anyone of life. The sword merely passes through the space between the 7 bodies. And then this same teacher that thinks this way, they talk about how there are those 1,400,000 principal kinds of generation and 6,000 kinds and 600 kinds. There are 500 kinds of action and 5 kinds of action and 3 kinds of action. And there's this giant paragraph of all of these enumerated teachings. And this is what I meant by this sounds a little like Buddhism in a way, all the way down to the very last. Such a teacher as this claims that there are 8,400,000 great kalpas, or there are 8,400,000 great kalpas wherein by running and wandering through the round of rebirths, both fools and the wise both make an end of suffering. There's none of this, meaning there's none of this by this virtue or observance or asceticism or holy life, I shall make unripened action ripen or annihilate ripened action as it comes. There's none of that. Pleasure and pain are meted out. The round of rebirths is limited. There's no shortening it. There's no extending it. There's no increasing. There's no decreasing. Just like a ball of string, when thrown, goes as far as the string unwinds. So too, by running and wandering through the round of rebirths, fools and the wise both make an end of suffering. So, I would suggest kind of another form of fatalism in that way, but with a twist of like, I'm not quite sure what you want to refer to those 7 bodies are. Um, the basic gist of it is that those 7 bodies are, well, again, the language is about how they are unmade, uncreated. They don't move, they don't change, they're unobstructed in that way. So this one kind of has a little bit of all the other 3 in that way, where there's sort of like not really anybody there to kill, so there's no moral problem there. And there is a soul, and there is reincarnation, but all of that is already meted out. It is already laid out for both the fool and the wise person. So the same thing applies, which is that if a wise person thinks about that view, they would think, wait a minute, this good teacher holds the doctrine and view that there are these 7 unmade, uncreated bodies and so forth, but that both fools and the wise come to the same end of suffering. But if this good teacher's words are true, then both of us are exactly the same here. We're on the exact same level. And I'm not going to repeat the whole paragraph, but it's the exact same. as far as saying if this guy's teaching is true, then there's no reason to lead the holy life. It's, in other words, like if you are destined to kind of be enlightened and be, what end your suffering, that's already been determined. So you're just here to like live out that experience in that way. So again, I would kind of call this a type of fatalism, but with a little bit more spirituality to it because of those seven bodies. Okay, we're going to quickly move on to the next four aspects, which are this weird idea of teachings that provide no consolation. That's the language. I've been trying to figure out what exactly the Pali is on this, but I haven't found it. All right, but very quickly.
Michael,
Oh, please. I'm sorry, Noam. Yeah.
that's all right. Can I ask a question about the previous four? Like,
Yeah.
there's in those worldviews, there is still karma, but there's no like agency or something like that, right? I was trying to think, is there no karma? Oh, there's karma. Like things affect each other, but like it's like deterministic somehow.
It's exactly deterministic in that way, where karma isn't quite karma as we know it,
Yeah.
because it's more of just like yeah, cause and effect in that way. But it's kind of all four of these are operating on a very materialistic level in that sense, where it's really just looking at the world materialistically, but with kind of different emphasis in terms of what that means.
Okay.
And it's why I wanted to mention that the materialistic view is alive and well in the world, right? It's like, it's kind of a very popular view in a certain sense. And I was kind of excited to do this sutta tonight to speak about the problems with that point of view in that way. All right. Shall we move on to the four teachings with no consolation? All right. So I'm jumping down a little bit, but just to paragraph 20, where Sandaka says, "Oh, it's wonderful, Master Ananda. It's marvelous how the four ways that negate the living of the holy life have been declared by the Blessed One who knows and sees, accomplished and fully enlightened. But, Master Ananda, what are those four kinds of holy life without consolation that have been declared by the Blessed One who knows and sees, accomplished and fully enlightened, wherein a wise person might certainly would not live the holy life, or if they did live the holy life, would not attain the true way, the Dharma that is wholesome?" Well, here, Sandaka, let's say there's some teacher who claims to be omniscient and all-seeing, claims to have complete knowledge and vision, thus, whether I'm walking or standing or even asleep or awake, knowledge and vision are continuously and uninterruptedly present to me. But then this omniscient teacher enters an empty house. Didn't he know it was empty? He gets no alms food. A dog bites him. He meets with a wild elephant, a wild horse, or a wild bull. He has to ask, he has to ask, what's the name of this? What's your name? What's the name of this clan? Or what's the name of this woman or this man? He asks, what's the name of this village or this town? He asks, what's the way to go there? And when this omniscient teacher is questioned, how is this? Like, how is it that you don't know these things? How is it that you got bit by a dog? The omniscient teacher replies, I had to enter the empty house. That's why I entered it. I had to get no alms food. That's why I didn't get any. I had to be bitten by a dog. That's why I was bitten. I had to meet with a wild elephant, or a wild horse or a wild bull. That's why I met with them. I had to ask the name and clan of a woman or a man. That's why I asked. Or I had to ask the name of a village or a town and the way to get there. That's why I asked. Now, about this teacher, a wise person considers this way. This good teacher claims to be omniscient and all-seeing, to have complete knowledge and vision always present before them. But when they're questioned about why they don't know things, they reply, I had to, and that's why I did it. So when that person finds that this holy life is without consolation, that person turns away from it. They leave it behind. All right, so this isn't so much about the view. The first four were about the view or the doctrine. This is about the actual teacher, right? And this idea, and by the way, we've heard this language before about a teacher claiming to be omniscient and that omniscience is present before them all the time. This is referring to the Nigantha Nataputta, the Jain teacher Mahavira. So we've heard this before. Does everybody kind of get the critique here? We might have even seen this before with like kind of like charlatan, uh, you know, um, might be fortune teller type people that sort of like, they have great excuses for why their powers don't work in that way. And so this idea of like if you're so omniscient, why'd you let that dog bite you? Well, it had to bite me, right? So this is kind of our first introduction to this idea that that teacher provides no consolation in that way. That makes sense to everybody? Cool. So let's hear about, these are interesting, by the way, because they do very much represent like different types of spiritual teachers. So for example, number 2 here, this is going to be paragraph 24. Again, Sandaka. Here, there's some teacher who is a traditionalist, one who regards oral tradition as the truth. They teach a Dharma by oral tradition, by legends handed down, by the authority of collections. But when a teacher is a traditionalist, one who regards oral tradition as the truth, some of that oral tradition is well transmitted, and some is badly transmitted. Some is true, and some is otherwise. So about this traditionalist teacher, a wise person would consider this way. This good teacher is a traditionalist, except regarding oral traditions, some of it's true and some of it's not. So when that person finds that this holy life is without consolation, they turn away from it. They leave it behind. So my interpretation of that would be a kind of scriptural literalist. We see it over a little bit more in the Judeo-Christian Islamic tradition, and it's the idea that the whole text is infallible. It's been handed down. This is the idea of the tradition. It's been handed down, and so you can't critique any of it. That's that type of teacher, the traditionalist in that way. Buddhism has always been promoting a kind of adaptation. It's even built into the teachings, where even in the early Pali teachings, the Buddha talks about adapting the teachings for the different places, different cultures, different times. So even though they're talking specifically about an oral tradition, I take it that they're talking about this kind of like literalism in that way. Or again, just that the whole collection is perfect in that sense. And of course, we know, by the way, that the Buddha does not claim to be omniscient like that in the way described. And we know that Buddha, as I was just saying, that the Buddha does not support or promote such literalism, promotes upaya in that sense. So that's the second kind of holy life without consolation. Number 3, Sandaka, let's say that there's a certain teacher who's a reasoner, an inquirer. They teach a Dharma hammered out by reason, following a line of inquiry as it occurs to him. But when a teacher is a reasoner, an inquirer, some of it's well reasoned and some of it's wrongly reasoned. Some of it's true and some of it's otherwise. About such a teaching, a wise person considers this way. This good teacher is a reasoner, an inquirer, but regarding that approach, some is true and some is otherwise. So, when such a person finds that this holy life is without any consolation, they turn away from it. They leave it behind. So this would be very much in a way about having that kind of a certain kind of logical view and then hammering out a kind of a conclusion based upon this logical view in that way. And that works, but not all the way. And, you know, if you look at kind of the history of Western philosophy, very logical, but it leads to some truths and to some not truths in that way. So, any questions about those first 3? And then boom, number 4, paragraph 30. And again, Sandaka, here there's a certain teacher who's dull and confused. And because they're dull and confused, when they're asked such and such a question, they engage in verbal wriggling, in eel wriggling. I don't say it like this, and I don't say it like that, and I don't say it otherwise, and I don't say that it's not so, and I don't say that it's not so. About this, a wise person considers thus, this good teacher is dull and confused and a wriggler. He engages in verbal wriggling, in eel wriggling. So when that person finds that this holy life is without consolation, they turn away from it, they leave it behind. Interesting footnote if you read the footnote on that one. So the footnote that the translators give is that this one is about a certain type of teacher that claims that the language and things, that the truth cannot be put into language. And so they just sort of wriggle around in that way because they say, well, we can't really talk about it. Again, something that is very close to Buddhist teachings, but not exactly the same as Buddhist teachings, because as we know, the Buddha talks and uses language forever and ever and ever, and has no problem with that in that way. So he's not a verbal wriggler in that sense. Okay, so now we have established the 4 views that are against the holy life and the 4 types of teachers that are not conducive to the holy life. Paragraph 34. It's wonderful, Master Ananda. It's marvelous how the 4 kinds of holy life that are without consolation have been declared by the Blessed One, who knows and sees, accomplished and fully enlightened. But, Master Ananda, what does that teacher assert? What does he declare, wherein a wise person certainly would live the holy life? And while living it, would attain the true way, the Dharma that is wholesome. So this, of course, is what we've been waiting for, right? Which is, well, if that's not the right way, what is the right way? Well, here, Sandaka, a Tathagata appears in the world, accomplished, fully enlightened. And then, as you'll notice, we would need to jump all the way back over to Sutta number 51 to fill in the blanks here. And so there is a long, I'm not going to read the whole thing, but there's a very long section which is about a Tathagata, a Buddha, appears in the world, accomplished and fully enlightened, perfect in true knowledge and conduct, a sublime one, knower of worlds. And then there's this whole paragraph about a householder or a householder's son leaving the home life and having thus gone forth, they train in the life of a monk or a nun, and they abandon false speech, and they abandon all kinds of other speech, and they abandon the injuring of seeds and plants, and they kind of go through the whole practice all the way up to the abandoning of doubt. And then they abide, having gone beyond doubt, unperplexed about wholesome states, and they become purified in mind from doubt. And that's what would spit us right back out where we left off. So Ananda says, Buddha, a Tathagata, appears in the world and spreads the Dharma teaching, right? And then that Tathagata, that Buddha, having thus abandoned the 5 hindrances, desire, ill will, restlessness and worry, sloth and torpor and doubt, right? So having thus abandoned the 5 hindrances, imperfections of the mind that weaken wisdom, quite secluded from sensual pleasures, secluded from unwholesome states, one enters upon and abides in the first jhana, which is accompanied by an applied and sustained thought. It is rapturously blissful with a pleasure born of seclusion. Sandaka, a wise person certainly would live the holy life with a teacher under whom a disciple attains such a lofty distinction. And while living it, they would attain the true way, the Dharma that is wholesome. So you'll notice that that kind of brings the whole section to a conclusion, because we return to that language of if all of that was the case, then a wise person that way would certainly be living the holy life with a teacher under whom a disciple will attain such a lofty distinction. What I'm getting at is because of all of the abridgment, right? So this one, it takes out all the repetitions and you have to go looking in other suttas to find the missing sections. If all of that was present here, I think we would have a better, clearer sense that the 4 jhanas are about to be like set up as our new set of 4. In contrast to the 4 views that Ananda dismantled and the 4 types of enlightened teachers that Ananda dismantled, those are going to be complemented or mirrored, I suppose I should say, with the 4 jhanas. And so that ability to get into the first jhana, that's what the Buddha's teaching, that is conducive to the holy life. That is not against the holy life in that way. And then, of course, what's going to happen is, and then again, with the stilling of vitarka and vichaya, so with the stilling of applied and sustained thought, one enters upon and abides in that second jhana. So that would be number 2. And then with the fading away of rapture as well, one enters upon and abides in the third jhana. And then with the abandoning of pleasure and pain, one enters upon and abides in the fourth jhana. A wise person certainly would live the holy life with a teacher under whom a disciple attains such a lofty distinction. And then this should all be like we know where this is going now, because we've been through this a lot, right? As we make our way through these suttas. So now that the person has gone through up to the fourth jhana, they are now open for what are called the three insights or the three wisdoms, right? So when that person's with a concentrated mind that is thus purified, bright, unblemished, rid of imperfection, malleable, wieldy, steady, and attained to imperturbability, one directs that mind to knowledge of the recollection of past lives. They recollect many past lives, 1 birth, 2 births, 100 births, hundreds and hundreds of past births. Thus, with all of their aspects and particulars, one recollects their manifold past lives. That being the case, a wise person certainly would live the holy life with a teacher under whom a disciple attains such a lofty distinction. So, happy to answer questions about the whole past life awareness, but we've talked about it a lot. The second of these visions or insights, and when that person's concentrated mind is thus purified, bright, unblemished, rid of imperfection, malleable, wieldy, steady, and attained to imperturbability, they direct it to knowledge of the passing away and reappearance of other beings. Thus, with the divine eye, which is purified and surpasses the human eye, they see beings passing away and reappearing, inferior, superior, fair and ugly, fortunate, unfortunate, and they understand how beings pass on according to their karmic actions. Once again, a wise person certainly would live the holy life with a teacher under whom a disciple attains such a lofty distinction as having the knowledge of the death and reappearance of others. And if you remember, we talked about this fairly recently, that the first of these is sort of about a certain kind of omniscience regarding the past, because it's about this full awareness of one's past. And then this second one is kind of an awareness of the future, like where beings are going to be reborn based upon their karma. And then the third, when the person's concentrated mind is thus purified, bright, unblemished, rid of imperfection, malleable, wieldy, steady, and attained to imperturbability, they direct it to knowledge of the destruction of the taints. And they understand it as it actually is. This is suffering. This is the accumulation of suffering. This is the cessation of suffering. And this is the path to the cessation of suffering. They understand as it actually is. This is the way leading to the cessation of the taints. When one knows and sees thus, the mind is liberated from the taint of sensual desire, from the taint of bhava, being, and from the taint of avidya, ignorance. And when it's liberated, there comes the knowledge. It's liberated. And one understands birth is done. The holy life's been lived. What had to be done has been done. There's no more coming into rebirth into any state of existence. That being the case, a wise person certainly would live the holy life with a teacher under whom a disciple attains such a lofty distinction as that, and while living it, they would attain the true way, the Dharma that is wholesome. a classic presentation of the path, right? So there's really no new information in there. It's a very standard 4 jhanas, 3 insights, that path. We've seen it before. Any questions? We have one more, the last little section, which is so interesting. I can't, we don't want to leave it behind, but any questions? All right, so let's finish it up. So Sandaka, he's impressed by all of this, but he has one question. He says, but Master Ananda, when a bhikkhu is an arahat with taints destroyed, one who has lived the holy life, done what had to be done, laid down the burden, reached their own goal, destroyed the fetters of being, and are completely liberated through final knowledge, can they enjoy sensual pleasures? Can they enjoy kama? Ananda replies, Sandaka, when a bhikkhu is an arahat with taints destroyed and is completely liberated through final knowledge, they are incapable of transgression in 5 cases. A bhikkhu whose taints are destroyed is incapable of deliberately depriving a living being of its life. They are incapable of taking what has not been given. That is, of stealing. They are incapable of indulging in sexual intercourse. They are incapable of knowingly speaking falsehood. And they are incapable of enjoying sensual pleasures by storing them up as they did in their former lay life. When a bhikkhu is an arahat with taints destroyed, they are incapable of transgression in those 5 cases. So let's talk about that really quickly. So those, of course, are like the 5 main precepts, right? Like the big 5 no-nos for everybody. And there's a way in which all the rest of us are working on not being as violent. We are working on not being as desirous. We are working on all of those things. But an arahat is, according to Ananda, and by the way, this is like, I would say it's Theravada doctrine. Like this is part of the early teachings that arhats are actually incapable of doing these things. In the case of the male bhikkhu, by the way, it's supposedly a litmus test for being an arhat that they can no longer get in erections. That's what they mean by incapable of sexual intercourse. Um, a lot of people debate that. There's a lot of talk about that one in particular. But I think it's actually more interesting to think about the incapability of taking the life of another being. Like that's kind of a very interesting one. Everybody okay with the state of an arahat? And again, I want to remind you that is a very exalted state of being. Essentially, it's a Buddha in that way. So, all right. And then this is also very interesting. We've encountered something like this before, but really quickly, Sandaka has another question. He says, but Ananda, or Master Ananda, when a bhikkhu is an arahat with taints destroyed and all of that, is their knowledge and vision that their taints are destroyed? Is that knowledge and vision continuously and uninterruptedly present to them, whether they're walking or standing or sleeping or awake? And Ananda says, mm-mm. As to that, Sandaka, I shall give you a simile. For some wise people understand the meaning of a statement by means of simile. Suppose a man's hands and feet were cut off. Whether he is walking or standing or sleeping or awake, his hands and feet are continuously and uninterruptedly cut off. But he would know this only when he reviews the fact. So too, Sandaka, when a bhikkhu is an arhat with taints destroyed, their knowledge and vision that their taints are destroyed is not continuously and uninterruptedly present to them, whether they are walking or standing or sleeping or awake. Rather, they know my taints are destroyed only when they review this fact. How many emancipators are there in this Dharma and discipline, Master Ananda? Phew, there are not only 100 Sandaka, or 200, or 300, 400, or 500, but far more emancipators than that in this Dharma and discipline. And then Sandaka says, it's wonderful, Master Ananda, it's marvelous. There's no lauding of one's own Dharma and no disparaging of the Dharma of others. There is the teaching of the Dharma in its full range, and so many emancipators. But these ajivakas, those mothers' dead sons, they laud themselves, and they put down and disparage others. And they recognize only three emancipators, namely Nanda Vacha, Kisa Sankicha, and Mahkali Gosala. Then the wanderer Sandaka addressed his entire assembly of wanderers. Go, sirs! The holy life is to be lived under the recluse Gotama. It's not easy for us now to give it up again, to give up again honor and renown. And that's how the wanderer Sandaka exhorted his own assembly to live the holy life under the Buddha, the Blessed One. All right, so rewinding really quickly, that last little part about the knowledge and vision being either uninterruptedly present before them or only there when reviewed. We've encountered this one other time, months and months and months ago. There was a sutta it's the Abhaya Sutta, the teaching to Prince Abhaya. And it's a little part at the end of that. Yeah, I didn't write down the number of that sutta, sorry, but there's a little part at the end of that where the prince, Abhaya, wants to know about the Buddha's omniscience and asks, like, so are you omniscient, like, all the time? Like, you just know everything all the time? And the Buddha says, no, it's not like that. It's basically if somebody asks me, I know. Or if I direct my mind towards recollection of past lives, I can recall past lives. If I direct my mind towards knowledge of the passing away and reappearance of others, I can know the passing away and reappearance of others. So we've seen this before. This just sort of kind of elaborates a little bit more about it with that great analogy of the person who loses their hands. And like, so are they walking around all the time aware of the fact that they've lost their hands, or only when they are aware of it? So all of this whole sutra, by the way, has a lot to do with that very last part, of course, where Sandaka's like, wow, that's so great. You don't like laud your own teachings and put down the teachings of others. Because the other people, that's what they're doing. They're just praising their own teachings, and they just put down other people's teachings. And then I didn't mention this too. I wanted to talk about this a number of suttas ago. I forget which sutta it was. There was a sutta where somebody was like, I think they were asking the Buddha, they were saying like, wow, like no taints, no suffering. Like that's like amazing. But how many people have actually achieved this? And the Buddha's like, yeah, not just one, not just two, but 100, 200, 300, 500. This is really important that the teachings of the Buddha are not just because the Buddha claims to have gotten enlightened and alleviated his suffering. The reason why Buddhism is sort of was so supported is because a lot of people, by doing this, realized the end of their suffering. And that is sort of, well, this whole sutta is sort of course, about Sandaka and company, right? He gets his whole crew to come over to the Buddha in that way. So the whole sutta is sort of about the very subtle nature of Buddhism in that sense. And that these other, again, these other teachings sort of have their, it's not that they're bad, they're just not exactly conducive to the holy life in that way. So, questions, comments, answers, ideas about the Sandaka Sutta? Any of the ideas that came up? Thoughts? Yeah, Robin.
When we were talking about the can they enjoy karma? And
Mm.
so these are the consolations that so that you don't have to battle with these things. And then at the end he said enjoying pleasures by storing, you can enjoy pleasures, just not storing them up. So now you have a good relationship with things. So that is the consolation, I guess, aspect of what.
Yeah, I. It's interesting that you should put it that way in terms of, well, what are the consoling aspects to Buddhism in that sense? Um, I think it would certainly be, if we contrast it with the four non-consoling teachings, I think we are to understand that that section about the emancipators, that a bunch of people have achieved this, that kind of is about how Buddhism is giving consolation to its practitioners in that way. Regarding your question though, Robin, or just sort of your inquiry, I would really want to remind us of last week's sutta where where the Buddha was talking about how, like, I'm not anti-pleasure. I'm anti-dependent pleasure. And that's where the whole sutta last week was about how there is a loftier, greater pleasure that comes from the jhanas, right? Either the pleasure from seclusion and then the pleasure from concentration. But this is pleasure that's coming from independence. And so I would want to remind you of that because it doesn't get totally spoken in this sutta. But Noe.
Thank you. Yes. Wow. 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 What fun.
Yeah.
Of course, I just lost what I was thinking of. That idea of it goes back to another sutra where the Buddha was talking to people, and he says, "You may think that I go to meditate and isolate because I'm disturbed, or that I'm still clinging. I don't. I go because I enjoy it." And I found my meditation recently to be really pleasant, and I find myself smiling more and more, and it's just lovely. And then I hear these other things at the beginning, it's like, oh, I put a question mark, such hold such doctrine and views of that defiled beings or beings being defiled without cause or condition. Sin.
Mm-hmm.
The Eskimo says, well, is there, if I don't know about heaven or hell or sin, is there action? He says, and the priest says no, and he says, well, why'd you tell me? So again, it's that idea of like, oh, so I'm really, really happy for the sutra.
Yeah.
Very thank you so much.
Oh,
And I
good.
think the thing that really, if I may, there's no lauding of one's own dharma, no disparaging of the dharma of others. Thank you so much. I needed to hear that.
Oh, good.
Thank you.
Yeah, no.
I'm really curious about that thing at the end that's come up before, as you mentioned, of that, Arhat isn't continuously aware of their whatever. The Buddha is not continuously omniscient. I'm just curious, like I don't get that. I mean, I understand it, but like,
Mhm.
why? Do you understand why? Is there a reason?
I have a lot of thoughts on that, actually. I'll try to just sort of, condense it down. If we read through, like, if we go through all of these and similar suttas, like about the views, right? I think one of the things that kind of really comes across is, and I don't know quite what word to use. It's tricky. The word is tricky because what I want to say, so warning, I want to say that Buddhism is very rational. Like it's very down to earth. And so ideas of like omniscience, but where it's like all knowing, all seeing, it's a little sci-fi.
Yeah,
Like it's a little like unprovable. I think it's what a lot of the discourse was about like, it's just like, what good is that idea, especially if they're wandering around still asking for directions and they're supposedly omniscient, right? Whereas the type of omniscience that the Buddha is being like referring to, that's a type of omniscience I can understand. I'm not saying by any means that I have such omniscience, but I understand like, oh, I see how that makes rational sense in that way. And I think a lot of the other aspects of the Dharma are like that. In particular, the one where the Buddha says, just try it and
yeah,
see. Like, I'm not even claiming that it's true or not, but
yeah,
just try and see if the suffering gets alleviated a little bit. So, that approach, it's like not
yeah.
faith based, it's not woo woo, as we say nowadays, right? So,
Yeah, I was thinking something similar that it makes the Buddha very human.
it makes all of this very achievable
Yeah, yeah,
in that way, right? Yeah, whereas the uber omniscient uh, Nigantha Nataputra is it's almost like a deity level that is very unachievable to us humans. Whereas everything the Buddha is talking about is very achievable, and not just achievable, but achievable by all. And that's like always been such an important, you know, I taught the Beautiful Nun suttas a long time ago, where their message to Mara is no, this is accessible to everybody. So those are, yeah, just wonderful aspects of the Dharma. Yeah, Maria.
This seems like the right time to share this little tidbit. I love finding out these things about science that um, validate teachings. And I was listening to the most recent Wisdom podcast, and it was Alan Wallace. And that oh, wait, so that's a different tidbit. The one I wanted to share around what you were just talking about is the fact that I accidentally ran across someone, Ernst Haeckel. He is the person who's responsible for the Tree of Life, all the taxonomy stuff. He was a contemporary of Darwin, but he really like took it much further, and he's responsible for this idea that each embryonic stage represents an previous evolutionary stage. And it just kind of blew my mind. And
Mm.
especially in the context of being able to sort of see past
Mm.
lives, or how someone got to this point. Uh, it is interesting to me to think about that. And then the Alan Wallace thing was, he's a Lama, he studied physics at Stanford and extensively. And he said, in his words, materialism is a zombie. It's in modern science, the modern science community, the contemporary science community, because it's just basically dead. No one's really taking that seriously anymore. And so I just wanted to share that. Yeah.
Nice. Thank you for those the mentions. Yeah, the shout outs. Thank you. I could say a lot, but it's gotten late. So I'm just going to say thank you for those great comments. Anybody else? Everybody all good? Awesome. All right, everybody. Well, thank you again for joining me on Sunday night. Always such a pleasure. We'll be back next week. Another sutta. I will take a look, see if we're going to move on to Sutta 77. We'll see you next week.